This is 12 Hours in the Future with Maria Sanchir. Welcome to the second part of my conversation with Steven Buonanotte, post-production audio engineer at Lehman College and City University of New York, whose work include Good Morning America, Pawn Stars, Dancing with the Stars, and Getting to Know the Bronx, which was nominated for 2 Emmys. In the first part of my conversation with Steven Buonanotte, I took him to a podcast that I saw on YouTube where an audio engineer was giving away top reasons why one should become an audio engineer. So, one of the reasons that that guy in the podcast gave to people was it's very hard to maintain a healthy relationship. And I remember how you told us in class, for those who don't know, like student, professor, and you told us in the class once that you would spend like hours on end in your apartment without getting out. You sort of almost like lost the whole social life, and because you were committed to what you were doing, which I admire. Like I cannot express in words how much I admire that. And but like again, you're married, you have 2 kids, and it's at some point you handled your relationship. Uh please tell us like how did you do that?
Yeah, I don't recommend what I did prior to marriage. That was I think if I would have stayed in that path, it would have ultimately destroyed me. I cut myself off from the world. I didn't. I mean, there was a solid like 6 7 year period where I didn't go out. I had very limited social interaction. And as a matter of fact, at the time, I had a partner who we would write songs together who taught at a Catholic school. So when her school was big, we wouldn't even meet to write. We would do stuff remotely. And so there were like weeks at a time where I didn't physically see anyone. I would talk to my mother every day on the phone or my brother or something like that, but I didn't physically see anyone. That's no way to live. I don't recommend that. I was very focused on getting my career, and that was cool, but I think that was bad. Now, kids was the hardest thing to deal with. It took me a while to figure out how to make that work, because a kid is like a full time job. It's more than a full time job, and then 2 kids is like 2 full time jobs. So to have a full time job plus 2 other full time jobs, it was too much for me to bear. In the beginning, I didn't really know what to do, and then I just sort of had to force myself. Okay, I have 5 minutes. I'm going to go work for 5 minutes. I would put my kid down for a nap, and I would literally run in. I would keep my studio on all day long, and I would run in and I would work for an hour. And that's hour. If that's what I had, then I tried to make the best of that hour, and I would work and I would go try to get something done. And then I'd hear the crying, and I'd just get up and I'd mute my speakers so they don't overload, and I'd go and deal with that. Um, and that got easier as my kids got older. But it is a struggle. My wife and I do squabble about it a lot, where I answer my phone when it rings. I don't care what I'm doing, I answer my phone. Every major thing that's happened in my career started with a phone call. So my phone rings, I answer it every time. And that can be a source of tension between the two of us. My wife comes from a different mentality of work where, you're done at 5 o'clock, you go home at 5 o'clock, and that's it. Like there's no 501. It's a little bit different now. She's actually got a new job, and she's doing more of the things that in a more of a responsibility based thing than a time based thing, and I'm starting to see her do a lot of the things that I did. So I guess in some way she might start to understand. I hope she's not going to watch this, but I, at the end of the day, I do try to make my family a priority in my life. And I go in and out of that sometimes where I forget, or I not forget, but I get focused on one thing and I realize, okay, I haven't seen my kids in a couple of days. That's not good. I need to stop this and spend time with them. And the pandemic has been ridiculously amazing to me. I've gotten to spend inordinate amounts of time with my kids and my wife, and so much so that I'm really panicking the hammer falling and having to go back to what I was doing beforehand, because I was less productive. I didn't see my family. It was just not a good it's not a good time. You need the balance of life. You need relationships. You need all that other stuff. And if you're lucky enough to be busy enough where you don't have the time for that stuff, it's fine, but you can't sustain that. You need to at some point you need to stop and have a life. Don't do what I did, because I didn't do that for a long time, and it took me a while to get back. I was very socially awkward after that. I had a hard time. I still have weird moments in social situations where I don't really know how to react, and which is completely different, than the people who knew me prior to that period of my life. I was always very outgoing. I was always the goofball. I was always quick with a joke and all that stuff. And it took me a really long time to get back to that. I was just the awkward dude in the corner, and that's no way to be.
I cannot picture that. So they say the world doesn't need another studio. Agree, disagree, elaborate?
I don't agree with that. I think I studied acoustics with John Stork, who's one of the premier studio builders in the world, and he was saying that he builds more studios now than he ever has in his career. And I think if I had to go to a place to do what I do at my house, I would do it less. I would I wouldn't I would omit a lot of the projects that may work, may not work. I would only go for the projects that where I knew were going to be solid. And here I could mess around. I could fail. You know what I mean? If I had to go to a place to do that, I'm paying to be there. I'm not going to want to. I'm going to make sure I don't fail because I'm paying for it. To have the freedom of my own space. There were a lot of projects that have gone on to make me some bit of success that started out as, let me see if this works. And having that this space allows me to do that. It's also got me more work. I can't tell you how many jobs that I've had that if I would have had to budget in a studio cost, I wouldn't have gotten the job. So, that has also certainly helped me immeasurably. So, I think more is better.
Great. Uh, I wanted to ask for to tell us a memory, if you don't mind. One of something like you messed up during recording, or maybe in film, something that you didn't foresee and it was hard, but you persevered and
Yeah, yeah, there's been a bunch. um, uh,
sure.
so when I first started working at Lehman, as in my current position, one of the first major projects that I was doing solo, like not as part of a team or it was just me, was to film, photograph, and record a choral concert. And it was a full orchestra and a full choir on a really big stage on the Performing Arts Center. And I arrogantly thought I know what to do. I'm going to take some microphones. I'm going to place them in between the chorus and the orchestra, and I'm going to put them on Omni, and it's going to capture our figure eight, and I'm going to capture the front and the back, and it's going to be great. And I convinced the choral director that I knew what I was doing, I set up my cameras in a spot that I thought was going to look great, and I had the audio going. And when I got back and I looked at everything, and it was just awful. The sound was awful. The I was in a too dark of a spot, so the quality of the video wasn't very good. And I don't think I took any pictures because of all the problems that I had with the video cameras that I figured, that I thought I knew how to use, but had a couple of different mechanical things on them that I had never encountered before. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. So that was I'm used to walking into situations that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm comfortable in that spot. And very rarely does it get the better of me, but this got the better of me. I'd never recorded an ensemble that large on a space that big, and had as little room as I had to set up. My initial thought was to set mics up in the front of the stage. Literally, the first violinist was, maybe this far away from the front of the stage. There was no room for me to set up mics in the front of the stage. The stage itself was about 6 feet off the floor, so I couldn't set anything up on the floor. I didn't have a stand to go high enough for that to be viable. So, I've since figured out better ways to record those concerts, and I think I've done a pretty darn good job of it. But that first one was a dismal failure.
It's great. I cannot imagine you running around.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But the one of the things about Lehman that's great is that I'm very often uh, kind of put in situations where I don't have any. To say that they're less than ideal is almost an understatement, and that's kind of cool because I feel like I've had to develop, pivot or perish. I've had to develop different skills that allow me to make it work. I mean, the biggest thing in anyone in this field is sometimes you just got to make it work. We very rarely have, the sun, moon, and the stars in the right alignment to make it, the best of something. Usually we have the worst scenario. And I've experienced new levels of that at Lehman in a good way, because it's kind of given me the opportunity to really be creative about how I'm going to mic something, or how am I going to maximize what I have available to me to get more out of it, which has been really cool and fun.
I absolutely agree. Especially if you don't have something, you usually try to come up with something that
Gotta make it
will
work.
help you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I've heard this. I hope you will not agree and tell me that I hope it's wrong. I hope it's wrong. So they say audio is not hot. If you're in audio and whatever the person you're into, they don't think that you're hot. So that's what I've heard.
I'm maybe misunderstanding the question. Are you
Well,
talking
it's not
about
sexy. That's what I say.
say again?
It's not sexy.
That's a matter of, that's what I'm looking for. That's subjectable. I think audio is very sexy. We are, as a as a species, we are very, we react a lot to sound. Um, Music. I mean, show me a 16 to 20-year-old kid that music isn't a huge part of their life. Show me someone who doesn't like to have the sound on in a movie. Show me someone who doesn't feel their body start to move in some way when they hear a dance song. I mean, even if they won't admit it, they're doing something, right? And you can see it too. I love, my, I call it my backyard mix, is on my playlist on Tidal that has all the full gambit. Anything that I even remotely listen to. My wife put stuff in there, so a complete mix of music. And when that one song that really is grooving come on, you'll see someone in a conversation, and all of a sudden they're like, music makes us do things. It moves us. So yeah, audio is it's as sexy as it gets. It's as moving as it gets. You know, um, how can you make someone cry with music? I mean, there's no visual. You can make someone cry. You can get someone angry, even without words. When Stravinsky opened the Rite of Spring, they threw tomatoes on stage. There was a riot, and it was there's no words. It's not like he said something that angered someone. It was the music angered people. Just the music brought people to throw produce on the stage. I mean, like, that's, it's not a visual. I mean, if you see an act on a screen and you see a puppy getting killed, it's a visual. You're angered by that because you're associating all these things with it. But to not have that visual and to evoke that same feeling, It's powerful because you have, it's like a book, right? So if you make someone feel something from a book, you don't have the medium of the visuals to corroborate that. You have to word it in a way where we come up to that conclusion. It's the same sort of thing. You're making people feel without their biggest sense, which is sight, right? I would assume I would say that our biggest sense is sight. So to evoke those emotions without the use of that is pretty powerful.
Oh yeah,
So
for sure. Like they say, if in film, the sound is actually 70% of what you're seeing,
I'll go. I'll abide by that.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So because like, of course, like I think if you see
But
someone
statistics are only eighty
crying,
percent true. What with you?
so like when you see somebody like having an emotional scene and
Right.
and they're crying and but there's nothing you can hear, it's not gonna move you.
Well, I mean, it's the person walking into the room with the low drone, with the low pedal tone. We know something's going to happen. That they're about to get murdered, and we know it. Whereas if that wasn't there, there's a great video on YouTube called, and I'm going to show this in class at some point for sure. It's called Star Wars minus Williams, and it's a scene from one of the Star Wars. I forget which one of the earlier ones. It's called the throne room scene, where I think it was one of the last of the original trilogy, where um, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Luke Skywalker come into this fanfare, and they walk through the army and the people, and Leia comes up and puts the medals on their face, on their necks rather, and it's no music, and they just kind of dubbed in some cheesy sound effects to give the scene some reality. And you're looking at this, and if I was Williams, I would have completely crumbled. Like there's nothing redeeming about the scene. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. But you watch it with the music, and it's triumphant, and you're beaming with emotion. So that one scene that was junk now is completely like this momentous big thing, all because of music.
Right. Just
So
like da-dun, da-dun, da-dun,
yeah, right.
da-dun. You know, the
I
shark is
think of
gonna
that.
kill ya.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine pitching that to Spielberg? I read an article once that Spielberg thought it was a joke. At first, two notes, and
Yeah.
Williams had the foresight to to pursue it, and it's literally the most memorable motif. I mean, I can't think of even what number two would be. It's that so far out from everything else. Um, you know, and we hear that sound, we know a shark is coming. How many movies has that been in, and we know immediately that we could be in an office building. We hear that dun dun dun, and we know that somehow a shark is going to appear somewhere. That's the power of music, of audio.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you heard this, but Hans Zimmer wrote Interstellar before production started.
Cool.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm
it's
I'm
okay, Professor. I'm not
I'm
gonna.
about a decade behind on current films, but um, I don't see that being that weird. I mean, I don't know what the circumstances were around that. Whether or not they had some specific, because before you film, you have storyboards and stuff like that. So the long before the first action is said, it's planned out. So he may have had time markings or relative ideas of what a cue would be, and maybe he started from that. I would. It's smart. To get music in before the cutting begins. Because you avoid temp music, which is always the big elephant in the room. But two, you sort of the scene can be cut around your music as opposed to you having to fit into something else. Which is also kind of cool. I've heard lots of stories like that where there's a film that has the music was done in a weird way as far as its relativeness to the film. I've heard of some films using other films' music as their score. I find that completely strange, because it's such a tailored thing. To be able to fit that in is a little bizarre to me, but it's been done plenty of times.
Yeah, and then they said he wrote the Interstellar uh, score, and then he, called Christopher Nolan, and he like let him listen to it, and he listened and said, "I guess I have to make the movie."
Oh, so it was way before. So it was even before the movie was conceived. Oh,
I
that's
think
kind of
they
cool.
like had an idea and they talked about it a lot or something.
I mean, listen, that's a testament to him as a composer. That he was able to evoke a film out of the music for it, and now I really want to watch that. Now I'm gonna make a point of watching it just so I could see how that flows. That flows with the film. I was just an old student of mine reached out to me. I don't know, maybe a year ago, uh, to advise a friend that wanted to do an improv film score, and I got this girl on the phone, and I didn't know her well enough to say that you're absolutely crazy, but I in a very polite way said you're absolutely crazy. To do that without, I mean, I couldn't imagine improving a film score with players, right? So, like, it's one thing to just doodle on a piano, and but this was an ensemble that was going to be improving this score. I mean, what if the director hates it? You have one shot, you can't afford to go back in the studio, all these other factors. And I lost touch with her, and I don't have her information anymore to see how it went. But, you know, I find a lot of the most amazing things musically or in content in general is when I see someone do something that I would never be brave enough to do. I would never have been brave enough to write a two-note motif for Jaws. Never. I never would I have done that. I would have never been brave enough to write an orchestral score for Star Wars. I would have immediately went towards something more modern like synthesizers, which were big at the time, because you have this futuristic landscape. I would have went towards a futuristic type score. I never would have been brave enough to do that. So, you hear these stories of stuff like that. The Firm, which is one of my favorite film scores ever, it's all piano. I don't know if I would have done that. I mean, maybe I would have. That one was a little bit believable, but so these composers, did these brave things. Corleone's Altered States score, that's wacky. I mean, granted, it's a wacky film, so in some weird way it sort of fit. But I don't know if I would have been brave enough to do that, to present this to a director and hope, and fear that it would have been like, all right, you're fired, next guy. So I look at stuff like that as really extraordinary, and I hope that at some point someone looks at choices that I've made and thinks that they're extraordinary in some way. I hope, beyond hope, that at some point something I do is going to fall into that category, and I'll know about it, because then I'll start to analyze it and be like, okay, it's not, I can do these things, right? Because that's ultimately what we want to do. That's ultimately how we grow. We don't grow in a bubble. We look at other people's work and we're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be that. And it's a goal, and you start to work towards it, and kind of do that.
Right. I really admire people who are so into their what they do. Like, I think you're one of those people, and
Thank you.
it shows. Yeah, I absolutely enjoy your class every single
Thank you.
Wednesday when we have it.
Right. It has been a very fun class. It's one of the smaller classes that I've ever taught, um, I think because of that, it's more conversation based, which is really, I think, the best way to convey information. Like I said, with school, what I teach is just this much, and there's this much to learn. So without that interaction and the questions, you know, we don't, we don't, you don't learn as much, and you don't get to convey as much.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put you in a little bit difficult situation, or maybe not.
Okay.
Brace yourself. Just okay. So, so in my understanding, there are sort of like main three sections in the sound in movies: dialogue, sound effect, and music. Okay, you have to choose what you're gonna do for the rest of your life.
Oh,
One
I
of
don't
them.
care
Well,
what
yeah,
we're
of course,
talking
there's
about.
like a
I
lot of
can't.
things like Foley, ADR, like
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I first of all, if you take everything that I do now, I love every. If you take every hat that I wear, I love every one of them. But if I had to do one of those for the rest of my life, I'd be miserable. I need change. If I do one thing for too long, I start to get antsy. I'm by nature I'm a lazy person, so I force myself to not be lazy. And by forcing myself to not be lazy, I have to keep moving. If I stop moving, then I'm gonna get used to not moving, and then I'm gonna stop moving. So I need two things in my life. I need to keep moving, and I need to be uncomfortable, because comfort, it gets me into trouble. Because with comfort comes complacency, goes back to laziness. So um, I need a certain level of discomfort in my life, and that usually comes from doing different things in different ways. So walking into a session of something I've never recorded before, in a space I've never recorded, or writing for a project that is. I'm writing music right now for children's music. I've never done it before. It's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So it's uncomfortable, and in a good way. Now I'm challenging myself, and I mean, instinctively, I want to say Foley, just because I think Foley's awesome, and every time I get a chance to do it, I jump, and it's so fun. But I think if I did that every day, I'd probably be miserable after a month or so. If that's all I did. So I don't know. I definitely do not like location recording as far as audio goes. That's probably one of the least favorite of the three, just because it requires so much, and it's a young man's game, and I'm not a young man anymore. I don't have the. It's a lot of setup and breakdown and moving
please.
stuff, and lots of gear and stuff like that. I don't know if I have that in me much anymore, but um, mixing is always fun. I mean, I enjoy mixing. I enjoy editing, which is strange because I'm not. Editing is a meticulous person's job, and I'm not a meticulous person. Not by any stretch, but when it comes to editing, I'm pretty meticulous. So it's a strange. I look at it a lot and say, why do you like this? But I do. I enjoy it immensely. So, but Foley's so fun. If I can get a job doing that more than I do it now, which is almost never, I would be very happy.
So sound effect. That's your choice.
Sound effects, yeah. I mean, just creating the sound effects too. I think I would also have a fun time, recording sound effects. So there's a car. Let's get a car. Let's put it in a space and put a mic up to it. Um, how do what's the best mic for a Mustang? Like, I don't know. I'd love to find that. I'd love to find out what that is. How do we best mic an explosion? I'd love to find that out. I have no idea. So stuff like that I think would be really really fun to do, as well as Foley. I mean, Foley, it's creativity to the max. I mean, how do you make the sound of someone sitting down on a leather couch without having a leather couch? Or even more so, how do you make sounds that don't exist? Like sci-fi films. What's the sound of a body rising? What's the sound of a spaceship coming in? What does an alien being, what kind of ancillary noises does an alien being make? Do they, they do weird things with their mouth? Do they tick? Do they, what are their footsteps? What's the footsteps of a uh,
Creature.
uh, jellyfish-like character make on the ground? So how do you do that? And that to me is just, the fun is pretty big.
Let's say I can't wait for the finals. For those who
Whatever.
don't know, of
I
course,
gotta choose there. I gotta write the final.
yeah,
Um,
we're gonna do some Foley.
yeah. I'm hoping you guys enjoy it as much as I would. As a matter of fact, like I said, I'm so excited about it. I may actually do the project myself just to do it. Um, but yeah, yeah. Foley is just so fun. It's so fun. I so very rarely have the opportunity to do it. But whenever I do it, I love it. I walk around my house with a drumstick. I'm tapping on things. My wife already thinks I'm nuts, so she just sort of brushes it off. But just to see, and I have this Rolodex in my brain that whenever I do something and it makes a noise, I'm like, ooh, that would sound like a good, whatever. Like I talked about the leather couch, XLR cables. When I'm wrapping them and I twist them, sound like leather. So like I have this in my brain. I know, okay, if I need to make the sound of a leather couch, I mean, granted, I have one right behind me, but I can use XLR cables and just twist them. It's got that leathery sort of sound to it. I would love that stuff. I would love to do that.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. This is my first official podcast as a guest. So
Oh, really?
I'm happy to do it.
I'm so happy that you trusted me to become my guest.
Absolutely. I'm in good hands. I knew I was in good hands. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, Professor.
You too.
Okay, bye.
12 Hours in the Future is produced by Jim Carney and Maria Sanchir, with technical help from Curtis Antwi. Special thanks to Professor Tom O'Hanlon, Dean James Mann, and Magda Soto. The executive producer and host of 12 Hours in the Future is Maria Sanchir. 12 Hours in the Future with Maria Sanchir is a series of conversations recorded by the Bronx Journal Radio through the resources of Lehman College, City University of New York. You can find us everywhere podcasts are available and on YouTube. This show is protected under international copyright and may not be recorded or retransmitted without written consent. Until next time, when we see you 12 hours in the future.